Ladies and germs, what's up? Happy Saturday. I don't know why my music wasn't playing, you know, the initial track, the track there. I just don't know why that wasn't playing. But whatever. Technical difficulties, I guess, everybody. There's technical difficulties, everybody. I want to start off the chat by saying, as you guys know, that there, so coaching is 50% off. That is the biggest discount I've ever run on coaching ever. I've never run a 50%. Summer months are slow for us, so, you know, people are on vacation and kind of trying to enjoy their summer and stuff. So admittedly, coaching has been a tad slow while still some bookings, but I figured, hey, why not? Why not just launch the craziest special ever and give people an opportunity to book it a lot cheaper? Every single coaching package that you would book is thousands of dollars off. At the very least, for the 1 month, you're saving $1,000. For the 3 month, you're saving $2,500. For the 6 month, you're saving $4,500. These are huge discounts, boys, so I'll keep that up. Link is down in the description of the video as well. Those of you thinking of booking, I have to stop the special when I reach 30 clients. I'm at 26. I can only handle 30, maybe 31 max. So I've got to pull it down at some point soon. So book if you've been thinking about booking, and let's fucking go. In the meantime, let's talk about, you know, the esters. Yesterday I had launched a video discussing the 9 things that I've learned. There are probably 29 things that I've learned that are very important, but can only really fit 9 into a video. And a lot of them were distinctions about each of the esters, cream being the best modality for testosterone to use if you are trying to minimize aromatization. And aromatization is like a big problem for you. Just use cream and dial in that way. Another one being the tolerance for HCG increases the lower the dose you go on an injectable. So if you go down 100 milligrams a week, you're going to be able to tolerate more HCG. You get more testosterone. You get more anabolism. You get more testicular function. You get more libido. So please keep that in mind. Go watch that video. We talked about how test prop, you can dial in with test prop extremely easy, like a lot easier and a lot faster than any other ester, including cream, frankly, because prop is in and out. You know, the next step below that, or above that, really, I should say, is fucking test suspension, which some of the users here have gone and executed and have started using and are able to dial into an absolute T. Keep that in mind, you know, like at the clinics, very few of them offer prop these days. That's why sourceless is useful as well. You can get that there. But nobody has test suspension, you know, except for the sourceless, and you know, UGL has test suspension. So just something to look into for folks. Guess let me get to questions in the meantime, and let's fucking go. Nosy Blacklight, good morning to you as well, brother. Have I been able to homebrew 20% DHT gel compared with the one from the sourceless? So I made a 20% DHT gel, and yes, it was comparable to the sourceless in terms of effect, but it was not comparable to, you know, the major vendor that's got the 20% high potency DHT gel in terms of, you know, ease of use. Basically, the stuff that I made, you know, still had powder in it, like in the gel. Yeah, I used aloe vera and DMSO and mixed it all correctly via instructions from ChatGPT with like 10 grams of DHT raw powder. But, you know, the gel, if you will, was still a little coarse because I couldn't quite mix it up the right way. Now, I probably approached it a little lazily and could have certainly mixed it better, but that was my bad. Quite honestly, you're better off just paying the money for the stuff that is compounded. Yeah, it's compounded DHT gel. It's really like an oil that you rub on either the scrotum, the shaft, or you could put it on your shoulders as well. Either way, it's going to absorb and you will fucking get loads of DHT. So just be careful with it, dose it appropriately, and go from there. I'm at the point, you know, I got to the point after trying to make it myself and having it work, but be coarse. I was like, let me just pay the extra money, you know, let me just get, you know, I have the sourceless, right? So let me just go grab it from the vendor, and it was at my doorstep in like 11 days. 2 big, beautiful dropper bottles of pure DHT. It's just fucking phenomenal. Jay Brody, how much zinc is in your protocol? 0. I think there's probably about 10 to 20 milligrams of zinc in a B complex that I take. It's a bioavailable B with a bunch of other shit, and it's got some zinc in it, but it's kind of negligible. You know, zinc at 25 to 50 milligrams a day, that is gonna block some estrogen? Definitely. But, you know, small amounts. You're not really looking at a whole lot. Chase Irons said, putting cream on your balls is weird and pointless. Just inject. Well, that's not a true statement. I respect and like Chase, and I've watched a lot of his content, but it depends on what you're trying to do. I mean, Chase is a bodybuilder who uses grams of testosterone at once. So for him, it obviously wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense. Where it makes sense for people is, number one, something fun to try, but number two, people who have problems with aromatization. You know, pretty often you can get to about 1,000 total tests and 30 estradiol instead of 45 to 65, which is where you'd be at 1,000 with injections on cream. So you end up just aromatizing less via all the DHT, which, you know, blocks the gene expression of aromatase. It literally is CYP19-1A or A1, whichever one it is, encodes the aromatase enzyme. But DHT downregulates that gene expression. So you end up literally just making less estradiol via less aromatase activity. You still make some, and it doesn't crush it. That's the beauty of it. But DHT, we all know, is very counter, both at the genetic expression level and at the aromatase level, to estradiol. So that's where cream is extremely useful. You know, cream is extremely useful also in addition to a low-dose TRT protocol that you have to dose because you can't tolerate higher estrogen, but you're not getting enough DHT with that low dose of test, like an injectable, right? 100 milligrams or so, 110, maybe 85, 90 something. Then you put a little bit of low concentration scrotal cream on and you get the DHT bump, but not the estradiol bump really. And then you're dialed in. So I think there's just many ways to skin that cat, and there's many different uses for testosterone cream. If you want super boners, you could go up to 50 to 70 milligrams a day of prop and 2 to 3 pumps of transcranial cream at 200 milligrams per milliliter and manage estrogen. As long as you're doing that, you're going to have super boners. There's all manner of fucking valuable uses for test cream. So I think that, you know, Chase is a smart dude, but we got to look at it in context. A guy is a bodybuilder that doses loads and loads and loads of test. Of course, he wouldn't be putting, 10 pumps of cream on a day. I think that would just, that doesn't make sense there. But 3 pumps, perfect sense. 4 pumps, perfect sense. A small pump of low concentration stuff on top of a low dose injection protocol to get the DHT makes total sense. I see it work all the time. Nemo, for daily injections, would it cause any issues if you're injecting with the same 1 to 3 hour window daily? Or would that throw things off? Like it's got to be on the hour. This is a good question. I think it should be at the same exact time. Yep, I think it should be at the same exact fucking time. I just had a conversation with my girlfriend about this because she's on HRT as well. And she's got to be timing the estradiol patches pretty perfectly. If she runs them every 3.5 days, just I get 0.5 milligrams of estradiol and some progesterone at night. But if it falls on the 3.5 day mark, falls at 3:30 a.m., and she should probably run it at midnight. Run it prior rather than being late on it. But with injections, look, a 1 to 2 hour window is fine. I would say if you're off by an hour, that's okay. But it peaks and then it starts troughing after a certain time, especially depending on the ester. And you want predictable results. Like, if you want the most predictable results possible, especially as it relates to sexual function, where in the morning, you're troughing, but it isn't too much of a trough. So your erections are still there. Everything's there. Libido's there. Sensations there. But especially at night, like on my protocol, which right now is 105 milligrams a week of injectable, it's Cypionate, daily 5/8 inch in the upper glute, 100 milligrams per milliliter cream, a fourth of a pump on the scrotum every morning. Essentially, the day before's cream and the day before's test injection, it still just lasts until about 11 a.m. the next day, but I still inject and do everything at 9:30. So then I have minimal lapses in sexual function. I'd say after injection, sexual function's amazing. Everything's peaking. It's great. Probably around between 2 and, I would call it 1 and like 5 p.m., I can tell, sexual function's a little less optimal than it needs to be or than I want it to be. I'm not having sex during that time anyway. My girl's usually working, I'm working and stuff. And then at nighttime, it's fucking phenomenal again. So, You know, I call that 85, 90% of the day or something. It's perfect. But if I fucking miss a window there, I've done it before. Yeah, I waited 5 additional hours because I was on a trip with my girl and we were really busy and I couldn't inject like I could have, but the conditions made it so that it was just fucking easier to not inject during that time. And it certainly fucked my protocol up and it took me about 5 days to recover. So you don't want to be doing this. You know, you want to get it on time. You want to get it on time. Dream big. Is there any cases where estrogen is at 30 to 32? Sexual function is fine, but for some guys, it's got to move to 25. Absolutely. Yep. And, you know, there's a lot of unknowns about why this happens. We don't really quite understand why some people are more sensitive to estradiol versus others. You know, we have theories about that. I think it's brain centric, but I also think that it's, you know, relative to the tissues too. If you had been exposed to a lot of estradiol and not enough DHT for a while, as is the case with 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, or high prolactin can do that too, because that's a fucking 5-AR inhibitor, prolactin. Then you've been starved of the DHT and you have an overage of estradiol. So your tissues are probably pretty sensitive now to that state. And anytime you go back into that state, just like if you had a broken arm, but it healed, you still might be a little sore. You still probably got to be careful with it. It ain't perfect yet, you know? It might take years to get perfect after that. You shouldn't be exposed to estradiol at high levels, and you might need to be at 20 and 25. So I've seen this kind of thing a lot. Generally speaking, you know, 25 to 30 is the range you want to shoot at. And you can absolutely do that with the right dose of injectable, maybe some added cream for the DHT, as well as 200 milligrams a week, you know, with an aromatase inhibitor or a DHT derivative. But not everyone can tolerate those. So if you're on test cream, is DHT gel helpful or not? For me, no. I mean, not at this point. It would be too much DHT. I'm already making just enough DHT from the injectable plus a little bit of cream. I mean, the transcranial cream is just fucking powerful at producing DHT. That's another reason, you know, Chase Iron's idea that it doesn't make sense. Well, you're getting more DHT. It absolutely makes sense. But at this point, no. My erections are fucking powerful for sex. My libido is very fucking strong. You know, in instances where, you know, me and my girl probably shouldn't be having sex, like when we're at her house and her kids are home, albeit sleeping, and they're grown up, you know, home from college. We shouldn't be having sex then in the morning, but we do because I'm horny as fuck. So I've got enough DHT, man. Nemo, been thinking about going to daily injections on test Cypionate, but there doesn't seem to be many advantages compared to other esters. I just did a video about this, so you should watch it, and you'll have the answer to your question. Daily injections only make sense when you can compound upon another strategy that you're using to lower estradiol, which would be a lower dose of testosterone. So, I mean, if you're sitting at 150, 170, 200 milligrams a week, daily injections really don't make sense, especially if you have HCG. It's just going to aromatize over anyway. You'll still aromatize less, but it doesn't matter. Your dick's still not going to work if you're sensitive to estradiol at that capacity. So you need to go down between 85 and 120 milligrams a week of injectable. And that's the time at which you compound upon that lower dose and therefore lower estradiol via less substrate for aromatization. And you inject every day to even create less estradiol. Yeah. So, you know, you approach it with that strategy, you're golden. Abdullah, anything you recommend to limit DHT 20% effects on hair and excessive sebum? Yeah, it can be bad. I know that I certainly, when I was using the DHT gel pretty frequently, got a little more acne than usual. There's not a whole lot because, I mean, if you try blocking DHT with Accutane as an example, or finasteride, I mean, you're even though you have the DHT to rub on systemically, you're still, albeit to a lesser percentage, playing Russian roulette with your dick. And you don't want to do that. Now, it's a little more controllable, but at the same time, DHT isn't the only endpoint of 5-alpha reductase enzymes. There's a bunch of brain-borne stuff that happens that, you know, 5-alpha reductase enzymes convert stuff too that you need, you know, especially for, I wouldn't say cognition, but like mood and mental health. So, I mean, you're running a risk there, dude. Not a whole lot. Just dose it intelligently. Really, you don't need a lot of that stuff. Usually 5 to 10 milligrams on the dropper bottle. That's like, it's a couple drops a day or every other day. It's the kind of thing that you might see a little bit of hair loss and some extra acne, but that tends to clear over time, and the hair loss shouldn't be substantial unless you have terrible genes. Ryan, what's the hierarchy for controlling estrogen if getting side effects when adding test HCG? Well, the hierarchy is in mastering testosterone cypionates. It's an hour and a half. It's an hour and 10 minutes or so of me breaking the hierarchy down. But generally speaking, the hierarchy is you start with higher doses of test and you try to tolerate AIs and go through a process of determining if you do, understanding the criteria of not tolerating AIs, which is joint pain no matter what, complete loss in mental libido no matter what dose of AI that you use, and seemingly like you respond to it like a hyper responder. Regarding this, though, it would be aromatase first for me personally. It's just what worked for me on cycle and, on various different high doses of testosterone. 6.25 once every 6 days was what worked for me, depending on the dose. I really couldn't go much higher than that. I would just scale the dose downward. I think once you start getting to, call it, 25 milligrams of aromatase a week, if that works for you, it works for you. For me, that's a little too much, and it just kind of tanks aromatase to the point where I get uneven distribution of estrogen to the tissues and I get side effects. So, I'm only running aromatase with test in situations where having the test as high as it is a non-negotiable, i.e. I'm on cycle. And I'm not on cycle at the moment, but when I was, to try to get this is basically my current physique at the moment, that was a non-negotiable. I was running a test cycle. So, was my libido and erections perfect once I got it dialed in? No, they weren't perfect, but they were good enough. I could have sex, penetrative sex, I think sensation was down a little bit. I was good, but the cycle to me was worth it. So in that case, it just, it's, you have an objective to put on some lean mass. So you're focusing on that first. SNC Nutrition with the super chat. Thanks, brother. If taking Anavar with Naringin and or citrus bergamot can increase the potency, would also increase the side effects. Likely. Anything that increases the potency of Anavar is going to increase the side effects of Anavar. Yep. I mean, side effects run the gamut. I know that I got some pretty gnarly tachycardia when I was running it, a couple months back. I was running low doses too, 6 milligrams a day. I think the 12 milligrams a day was where I started, 11.5. And the tachycardia was pretty intense. And then it would occasionally happen on 6. And I would have blown past that and it would have regulated. But at the time, I just didn't want to deal with it. I just didn't feel like dealing with it. It was an otherwise intensive time in my life, and there was a lot of shit going on, and I didn't need one more thing, So that's kind of where we're at with that. But anything that increases in potency increases side effects. I think so. But some people take Anavar and they're totally fucking fine, no problems whatsoever. Lucky ducks. Others have side effects at lower doses. Jake, oh my God, a couple hours make a 5-day difference. You got to be kidding me. Yes. No, I'm not kidding you. I'm not. For those, it's like you might be one of those people that thinks like everything's placebo and that like you don't picture at a granular brain imagery level, because I actually picture these things: the pharmacokinetics, the depot, how it's releasing, hepatic aromatase expression, generally the levels of testosterone and how they might change over a 24-hour period if you're dosing late. Yes, it's very quantifiably true that the system's going to have different fucking levels in the blood and at the tissues if you inject 3 hours later than you usually do. Yes, that's true. Hector, good morning, brother. At 18 milligrams a day at test E, yeah, that's a reasonable dose. You're right on that edge. I was doing 150 IU of HCG and got estrogen side effects. Yeah, you just need to take your dose down to 112 or 105 or maybe 98 of test. Would 100 IU of HCG every 3 days be good? No. See, it's more the injectable, which is disproportionately the substrate for aromatization here, than it is the HCG. HCG is not an aromatizable compound itself. It just stimulates your, Leydig cells to make some estradiol more than usual. And then you make more test, which converts to estradiol. So it's a twofer in that regard, which isn't good. But if I were you, I'd keep that same dose of HCG and go down to between 98 and 112 milligrams of test a week. That's exactly what I would do. Yep. yeah, I would go to the lower dose and run some Anavar if you're missing anabolism for sure. You know, you're not particularly anabolic on 100 milligrams a week, but it is what it is. You know, it is what it is. I certainly look smaller. I mean, I don't have a pump right now, but my physique is generally good, and this is, you know, what I look like without a pump right now. I mean, that was taken a few weeks back. That's kind of where I am. You know, with a pump, I look like a fucking monster, at least for me. You know, for me. And that's on 100 a week. Now I have a little more cream, so a little more DHT, a little less subcutaneous tissue. So the pumps at the gym are a little more gnarly, a little more veiny and stuff. But you know, that's generally what you're looking at, man. Samuel, I think I just froze. Why did I freeze? Hold on, boys. We're back. Just need to unplug and replug in the old camera over here. How to prevent being less masculine with daily HCG with TRT? If you feel like you're like that, then you ultimately have to get the dose of test down so that estradiol isn't above range. And that's it. I mean, HCG has really never feminized me. The only time that I felt actual, you know, maybe what you could consider some degree of feminization was when my estrogen was at 95, and that was on cycle before I got it down. And I don't want to say feminized, but I certainly had a deeper voice and was strong and felt fucking good at the gym. But I was certainly a little more emotional, maybe. You know, that was sort of it. So you got to control the estradiol. But, you know, at any time that you're in that case, like where you think you're feeling some sort of feminizing effect from high estrogen, DHT will counter that. DHT will counter that. You know, you need DHT to feel like you're a man, you know what I mean? And to not have female features and shit in terms of your behavior. You need the DHT, brother. So, you know, get a little test cream if you need to, and get the DHT, get actual DHT from source list, and go to town. Steve Wonderful, on a cream prop hybrid protocol, what is the best time to do labs? It all depends on what you're trying to figure out. I mean, you want to do labs at the peak, which for each of them is different. I mean, prop, you're peaking at about the 18-hour mark, but it could also be the 24-hour mark. You know, it all depends on how you're metabolizing the fucking ester, which is not the same, and your body doesn't adhere to the studies either. How could it? You know, your bodies do different shit. With cream, you're peaking on test in the first 10 to 16 hours, after which you stay physiologic for a while and it then slowly troughs. So, I mean, I think your best bet would be, if you're doing them both, just go test it at the 18-hour mark, you know, the 15 to 18-hour mark, and then you're probably going to catch your peak in that window. Nosy Blacklight, does the concept of daily injections limiting aromatization apply to HCG dosing? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It does. Yeah. Just less substrate to stimulate the Leydig cells. Yeah, I think HCG should be dosed daily if one is estrogen conscious. Definitely. I dose it daily for that reason. I dose 330 a day. You know, it's a lot of HCG, dude. But I need it and can tolerate it. And again, one of the points that I made that I saw in coaching, I basically took what I learned in coaching and just applied it to myself for this current protocol, was that, you know, I could go down on test and tolerate a lot more HCG, and it's like better for the sexual system. Long as that HCG doesn't denature, which it does a lot faster than people fucking think. Just because you have some HCG left in the vial, you know, doesn't mean it's good. You could be injecting that shit. It isn't doing shit for you, man, because HCG goes bad a lot sooner than they purport. Chris, is it true most can tolerate 200 TRT with 50 zinc? That's assuming you heard that somewhere, and no, that's not true. 50 of zinc is pretty powerful at blocking aromatase, so I guess you'd have to see. I mean, I've seen people on the forums that have reduced estradiol by like 25 points with that dose of zinc, so it's fucking powerful. It is an aromatase inhibitor, so you're just going to have to kind of figure that out. Jake Lawrence, it's not estradiol, but estradiol is rent-free in your head for sure. It's not the estradiol causes sexual dysfunction. Are you fucking kidding me? Okay. That sounds good. Why don't we do this, Jake, since you in the comment section against the dude who's been coaching people on TRT for more than a half decade wants to think that you're right? Right? Because you listen to Jay Campbell and the TRT YouTube optimization channel and every other person who idiotically makes blanket statements about a chemical that, first of all, is used to feminize men when they're going to transition to females. Feminizes them. Changes the sex organ. Shrinks and atrophies the sex organ. Through estrogen receptor alpha, inhibits penile nitric oxide synthase and blood flow and arterial inflow. But why don't you just go Google for me? Since you want to challenge what is true in the literature, why don't you just go Google serum cutoff 32 picograms per milliliter erectile dysfunction and go read the fucking study, which concludes after 32, which is right at the top of Quest's cutoff of 29, you're statistically more likely to get erectile dysfunction. And then after you do that and you read that paper, go study the counteractive effects at vascular tissue in the corpus cavernosum that estradiol has via the ERA pathway to dihydrotestosterone and androgen receptor activity. Go do it. When you've done a few hours of that study, come back and say something. This is like challenging a fucking mathematician that's been doing it for 20 years on geometry. Are you guys mad? Nosy Blacklight, does the sourceless 20% DHT smell bad? It smells a little bit like peanuts, I want to say. Yeah, maybe because peanut oil is in it. It's an oil-based thing. Will you be doing a course on prop or prop cream hybrid? The course that I'm working on now, which has admittedly gotten a little bit sidetracked, is the prop course. It's just the TRT God ester prop and how to dial it in. You know, on the Cypionate course and on the prop course as well, it's just a format that you should use to dial in on these esters. You know, you first have to figure out, can you tolerate higher doses without an aromatase inhibitor? Can you tolerate higher doses with an aromatase inhibitor? And then you move to DHT derivatives if you can't. Then after that, you're going to have to stepwise lower the doses while keeping the AIs and the DHT derivatives in. If you figure out through that process you can't use DHT derivatives or AIs, because there's a large percentage of people who can't, that's the time at which you've got to start, you know, going low on the test, as low as you can go without losing some of the positive benefits. You're just targeting estrogen being in the right range, after which you might need to employ some ancillaries to get the proper DHT that you need, because those lower doses don't always deliver enough DHT. I love this. I love this. This sounds like a what's that guy's name? The guy that talks about cream all the time is probably that guy. That sounds like one of his statements or some of these other guys' statements. What does it even mean? You know, are you posting any papers here? You know, you just want to say something. You just want to say this little like fucking slide at me. Like it's like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? I study this for a living. I work with men in a hormone capacity, sexual function capacity for a living every day for years. Do you? Or are you repeating stuff you heard on YouTube from one or two people? I know the reality of this, man. Rent free. It's in my head for a reason. Okay? Clients show me. Virtually nobody's dick works above a certain level of estradiol. I haven't had a client in probably like 2-3 years that can tolerate above 45 estradiol and everything's perfect. I see this shit all the time. I don't know where you guys get this. You need to have better standards than not to have false confidence based on something you're regurgitating. You're not doing this in practice. I am. How the hell do you have confidence about it? Because you believe you're guru. Dream big. My pregnenolone dose fixed all my deficiency symptoms, but the raise in progesterone caused weak erections. Yeah, I would say, because progesterone itself can be inhibitory to DHT. So if you could add a little bit of test cream or DHT, that would be useful. Hector, if 112 milligrams of test E energy is okay, how would you mix it with prop for energy without estrogen going too high? It's tricky. You're gonna bump the E2 up. I mean, no matter what. I think you want to probably start with like 5 milligrams prop a day on top of that, and see if that gives you, because it, like, you know, prop also reduces to DHT at a I would say you get more bang for your buck per peak, right? Just because it happens all at once. You got a lot of DHT at the tissues and a lot of DHT in the serum from it. So you can hope that kind of counters the extra estrogen that will be created. But if you're trying to add a fast-acting something on top of your 60 milligrams of test a day, just do low concentration cream, 100 milligrams per milliliter, and start with 1/4 of a pump. It comes out in these little kind of noodle-like swirls. So it's a little difficult to do that. You just have to, click the container, push the top down so all the cream comes out, and then there's 4 little swirls of cream in different locations on the top of the Toppy Click container. You just put your finger on one, take one of them and rub it on the testicles. You start there and move your way up if you have to. Jay Gosh, I went down to 1 pump of cream every day to control E2. Felt terrible. Then back to 3 pumps. I just feel better on higher androgens. Yeah, you're absolutely going to. And that's the tricky thing with cream is that cream itself, like I feel pretty bad on 2 pumps, but I feel great on 3 pumps. But 3 pumps, my estrogen's at like 30. 30. If I dose a lot of HCG, it takes it up. So I've got to be real careful with that. I have dialed in on 3 pumps before and the erections were really good. A lot of acne though. I mean, more than I would like. You feel better with higher androgens? Yes, most people do. You got to find that sweet spot where, below which your energy goes to shit and above which your dick doesn't work. It's that narrow of a window for some people. Please remember that. Okay, Johnny Cook, is there any reason why you couldn't run DHT while on 250 tests and 150 primo? There's no reason why you couldn't. There's not a really good reason to do it, though, because I think you're getting a lot of that high potency, long duration androgen receptor activation, which disassociates at a far lesser rate or lesser time than test itself at the receptor, at the AR. So you get all manner of androgen-mediated gene expression that way, which is what you want. And it's potent DHT-like gene expression. So I don't want to call the use of DHT in this case redundant, but it might just cause additional problems. Now, if you're one of those people that's not super sensitive to blocking estradiol via DHT derivatives, then the DHT itself might be super useful and give you fucking killer erections. It all really depends. Ryan Parsons seconds the idea that Jake Lawrence, who is not a specialist that we know of and has seen 0.0 men in a coaching capacity or a clinical capacity, has a position on estradiol and is likely taking the advice of the few YouTubers that are actually the minority and have been proven wrong time and time again, both by the studies and by people's experiences. Ryan is seconding my opinion that Jake is not correct. PD, currently on a 0.5 cc of SIP twice a week, TRT cream every other day, and low dose HCG under 200 IU. And I feel the best on HCG. I don't really understand your question. First of all, I have no doses here, PD, so it'd be useful for you to give me doses. Secondarily, and I feel the best on HCG. Why is that? In the context of what you said here, I'm not really sure what you're asking. HRT clinic, likely coming soon. It's just still weighing it out and thinking about it. There's a whole bunch of preliminary shit that has to happen, not the least, which is finding the right partners. And these are medical doctors that I've got to have on board. So something I'm thinking about. Jay Gosh, I took Accutane 20 years ago, still suffering the side effects. I'm sorry. That's terrible. You can get out of that. Do I think Proviron can help? I think so, but I think the right amount of test, estrogen in range. You must have estrogen in range if you have PFS or any kind of Accutane-induced sexual dysfunction. Yeah, because your body's used to under-converting to DHT and over-converting to estradiols. The tissue's probably super sensitive to E2 at this point. And so you're going to need to keep estrogen in range no matter what. So find an HRT protocol that does that and supplement with additional DHT, because it's probably going to be a low dose of test, like 100 milligrams, 80 milligrams, something like that. So you might not get enough DHT there. Add the DHT via transdermal DHT or a little bit of low concentration cream to fix that. And then once you're stable and you have like pretty good erections, pretty good sensation, all that stuff, let that sit for a while. Keep the protocol, do nothing for 6 months, and that's where you really get recovery. At the same time, though, you might want to consider throwing down 50 to 100 milligrams of sildenafil every night, actual Viagra, to facilitate nocturnal erections. Nocturnal erections is what prevents penile fibrosis. And if you haven't had them for a long time, you start to get fibrosis. So that would be one thing to try to target. At the same time, a small pump of a low concentration cream at night on top of whatever protocol you land on is also a good thing to foster the nighttime erections. Yeah. And therefore start to reverse the fibrosis. Additionally, do some penis pumping. Jay Brody, do your courses work for people in the UK? We don't have sensitive estrogen blood tests. Yeah, they work, yes. But there is some sort of limitation on UK for purchasing for us, just because we couldn't ship our physical products there, the nootropics that I built. And the system, as far as I know, doesn't let me sort of select country by product, which I'm sure I could fix. I just haven't. Anyone in the UK that needs anything can, email me and we'll get you an invoice and get it done. Good morning, bro. Double shots. Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. I had one this morning. Right when I got home, I slept at my girl's house last night and drove home this morning. Had one right before the stream. Had a big cup of coffee this morning with some, so it's regular Keurig coffee, but my girl and I, we put instant coffee in it too, just to make it, like McDonald's coffee. So we're just have crack in them, apparently. Darren Hawkins, thank you for the super chat, brother. That means a lot. Please ask questions if you have them. You are very fucking generous, dude. Darren, is it true that 10 milligrams micronized DHA is the same as 25 normal? I don't know. I don't know the kind of the breakdown there. I think the micronized stuff is just more highly absorbable. There's some effect at the absorption level that is, makes it more optimal than regular DHA. I use the micronized stuff. I use that. Chris, any thoughts or experience with gonadorelin for people that can't tolerate HCG? Everyone, I think, can tolerate HCG, but you're going to have to take your test dose down. You're going to have to take your test dose down and potentially work on some neurotransmitter stuff that, is the basis for why HCG is exacerbating an anxiety disorder or something else. It's not that HCG does that. The only time I've seen HCG be kind of a non-starter is people with current long COVID, because HCG is immunogenic and it just fucking further exacerbates their histaminergic intolerance that they have, via long COVID, and just causes them to have consistent problems. But you probably got to go lower on the test dose. Regarding gonadorelin, it's just not perfected yet. I think it certainly can work, but it probably works more in a capacity where you inject twice a day, which is a pain in the butt. Possibly even 3 times a day would be better at lower doses. At the same time, in the literature, there's one case study where it created a pituitary tumor. Just injecting gonadorelin gave someone a pituitary tumor. So, you're not getting that with HCG. Just sort of one of those things I'd be a little careful about. I don't think gonadorelin is it. I don't. I think kisspeptin has some potential, but kisspeptin also needs to be developed further too. And there needs to be a better delivery method or something that stabilizes the half-life and kind of makes the effect similar to where the studies of kisspeptin 54 were done, where they had a positive outcome. Ryan Parsons, androgen reset, panacea or evidence-based, your take? Oh, I don't know what that is. You'll have to maybe link me and see, so I can see exactly what that is. Yeah. But if there's no such thing as an androgen reset. I think a lot of people have a ton of theories on shit regarding androgens. Like, people think their androgen receptors are fried. No, they're not. They're not. What does that mean? You know what kind of fucking scientific manufacturing of ARs that you would have to do to actually kill androgen receptors? You can only do that in a lab. You can only do that in a lab. I think people are attributing their problems to whatever they think sounds logical, which I can't blame them for. And it might sound logical that you have androgen receptor problem or some shit like that. But it's usually not true. Guys, as I said in the beginning, this is the biggest special on coaching we have ever run. I have never run 50% on coaching ever. You are saving thousands of dollars on every package that you get. At the very least, $1,000 on the 1 month coaching. Keep in mind, those of you that are looking at the month option for sexual dysfunction, and if you're trying to get libido and erections back, a month doesn't give us a whole lot of time to try things. We'll get progress for fucking sure. And I'm going to have to be extra surgical in the fact-finding process to suggest the right first protocol, but adjustments are almost always necessary. So if you can manage doing 3 months, you're still saving $2,400 there, $2,500. Do that instead. Either way, if that doesn't make sense, book me for a month and we'll get some good progress. But coaching is 50% off. I've never done that ever. I'm stopping it once we get to 30. Once my client load is 30, because I can't really handle more than 30 at a time. And I'm at 26 right now. Job. Sourced in order DHT Enanthate. Ooh, awesome, brother. That's pretty cool, bro. I mean, I hope you have a good time on that. Yeah, for E-Control. Primo absolutely tanks extra for me personally. Any thoughts on the approach? Low dose it. Low dose it. 5 milligrams at a time. 5 milligrams at a time. Don't go crazy with it, man. Don't go crazy with it. And if you do, then you know the dose at which it's blocking estrogen a little too much, right? Via gene expression inhibition, aromatase gene expression, and some, typically at the tissue level, it's just sort of competing for estrogen for the net effect. So, I mean, for me, I got to take not a whole lot, but pretty good amount of DHT to feel like I'm in crushed estrogen land relative to sexual function, and then my libido goes away. DHT can absolutely kill your libido if it's just too much, but the right amount counterbalances estradiol perfectly. Listen, the reason we've got to be so surgical with protocols in narrow windows of dosing and all that is because your body, under normal conditions of being a natty, does that anyway. Your body does that. That's why people that are natty, they don't have sexual dysfunction, their dick works, everything works really good because their body is tightly regulating it. Once you get into the land of having to inject stuff yourself, you have to tightly regulate it. Your body will do some regulation, but you got to make sure you're giving it the raw material and the right amounts and the right frequency for it to regulate it correctly. Do I do anything pre-workout or before gaming? No, I'm injecting at 9:30 in the morning and usually going to the gym at between 11:30 and 2 p.m. So that's the window in which, I'm peaking on androgen. So I feel pretty goddamn good when I go to the gym. Quite honestly, it's more food-based for me these days. I'll eat something salty and sugary before the gym, and usually something sweet after the gym, as well as something savory. So I just make sure that I do that, and then I'm good to go. The biggest determinant of if I'm going to have a good day at the gym, of course, it's androgens. Like they need to be at my threshold of below which it's problematic, above which I start having dick problems. But at the same time, I've got to sleep at least 7 hours. If I'm sick, call it 6 hours or below, then I'm going to have a hard time recovering from the gym. Now, if I was on 150 milligrams plus of testosterone, I wouldn't have no hard time. I could sleep 5 hours and be like Trump all day. Like, what's up, motherfucker? Ivan, hello, bro. When using cream, can I use Proviron? Sure, you can. I've done that before. 2.5 pumps of transcrotal cream, high concentration with 12.5 milligrams Proviron. I dialed it on that too. Wasn't quite perfect, but erections were good. Libido was good. Sensation was good. Best time to take labs and prop and cream is at the peak, which would be 16 to 18 hours, 15 to 18 hours. Dream big. Is there any side effects from crushing prolactin to zero? Oncabergoline 0.252x a week just for recreational play. I can't tell if anything wrong, just positive sexual benefits. Yeah, that's what you're going to get. I mean, if you listen, I've said this before, so this is going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but if you ask any, well-established, well-read, well-studied, and significantly experienced endocrinologist who studies this for a living and who practices this for a living, they're going to tell you one critical thing. And that is, in the literature, there is no disease associated with zeroed out prolactin in males. That doesn't mean that because prolactin is sort of anti-stress to an extent and maybe modulates the immune system, that doesn't mean that there might not be any negatives to crushing it. But, generally speaking, no, there really shouldn't be any significant negative. There's just a bunch of negatives when prolactin gets out of range. If you wanted to hear the idea that there's ranges for a reason, all the ranges are a reference for what, a large amount of people that were studied, where their blood prolactin levels are. It doesn't necessarily say that everyone should be in that range or that everyone should have, super high prolactin. Even on a lot of CAB, you're not going to crush it to zero. No. I mean, you might end up at 1.2, 1.9 or something, which is technically low. I think below 2 is low. But then you just scale the cabergoline dose down a very little bit, maybe skip a day. Instead of doing every 3.5 days, every 4.5 days or something. And then you'd probably be in the 3 to 5 nanograms per milliliter, prolactin range, which is fine. But I was at 1.7, then 1.9. I think that lasted about 2 months. I had 0.0 side effects. I felt fucking awesome. I had a refractory period like a porn star. It was great. Yeah, it was great. 0 prolactin equals risky behavior. Yeah, I mean, that might be the downside there. Downside might be you're very horny all the time. You know what I mean? You're very horny all the time. I mean, those dopamine agonists can be real powerful. I've taken both bromocriptine and cabergoline, and they're really powerful, man. They're powerful at making you do things that are addictive. They're powerful at like one time, the first time I'd used cabergoline, was it cab? Yeah, I was using cab. I was a smoker when I was in the military, a cigarette smoker. And the first time I'd used cab, like it was week 1 or something, I bought a pack of cigarettes. Why the fuck would I do that? You know what I mean? And I smoked one, and then I smoked another one. And I'm like, fuck this. But holy shit, the cab and the dopamine agonism made me fucking do that. So you definitely got to be careful with that shit. But no, I really don't think that prolactin at 0, it's going to be hard to get it to 0, first of all. But prolactin between 1 and 3, it's not really a problem. And no hormones doctor worth their weight in salt is going to suggest that it is, because there's nothing in the literature that suggests that. There's no disease associated with low prolactin in males. Now, prolactin in females certainly needs to be high at various points, especially when they're breastfeeding. But in males, we don't really have much of a use for that. We just don't. It only causes problems when it's up. Now, estradiol is a little different story, but we still shouldn't have that high. We're not made for that. Estradiol is given to males that are transitioning to females. Estrogen in HRT form is given to females who are in menopause. Estrogen is not something that we do particularly well with. You might feel pretty fucking good, but dick problems are afoot. JL Montaigne. Any of your clients report pain and pressure feeling in their prostate when using test prop? Maybe DHT causing that. No, that's the estradiol, almost definitely. Well, the estrogens in general, yeah. To my knowledge, no. Just referencing back in my immediate memory, no, nobody's reported that, but it can certainly happen. Yeah, you're going to find that like a lot of things that people attribute to prostate, the prostate doing one thing or the other are just estrogen. Yeah, you'll find it on the bloods if you actually track it. That when it becomes harder to pee, that's not DHT. It's not DHT. Your estrogen's high. If you took an AI at that time and got the estrogen lower, or you took a DHT derivative, or you were able to lower it otherwise, but keep your DHT high, you'd not have problem peeing anymore. What you think is attributable to DHT regarding prostate or being harder to pee or et cetera, almost definitely attributable to estrogen if you actually did the work and didn't theorize about it to figure that out. Morning anxiety and insomnia on test P, or is it E2? Well, it could be just an adjustment to the extra surge in hormones, more dopamine synthesis. It's probably what it is. But, if you're aromatizing a ton on that, then yeah, fucking estrogen will do that. Estrogen will do that. A lot of the side effects from estradiol go away from higher estrogen. The only side effect that never goes away if you're sensitive to it relative to erections and libido and sensation is sexual problems. They just will never go away. You'll have to get the estrogen down. Jay Brody, are men who are on finasteride who say everything works properly telling fibs? No, I think that they're still making enough DHT. That's all. It's just not bottomed out. Yeah, it's not bottomed out. And probably a lot of these people are people that aren't making a lot of testosterone to begin with. So if they're sitting at 400 or 500 nanograms per deciliter of test, they're making just enough DHT, but the estradiol isn't super high. They're obviously converting more to estrogen versus DHT, but it's just not pushing them above that threshold. And that's just kind of the bottom line, man. I think that it's... You can take finasteride and not kill the DHT completely. And for the people that respond fine to it, their DHT isn't bottomed out. And they're not as sensitive to lower NDHT and slightly higher estradiol. Again, this is assuming they've got pretty low test or mid-range test. I mean, if they're pushing 900 to 1,000 a test, I think that's where it becomes a lot more problematic, even 700. It's just more substrate for aromatization. So less DHT, more E2. E2 fucks everything up. People talking about, E2 is not like the causer of sexual dysfunction. The cause of sexual dysfunction is lack of DHT and or excessively high estradiol. But the whole reason that people have PFS, which is documented, and I've seen fucking many cases over the years, is because they're not making enough DHT, and at the same time they're making too much estrogen, which causes sexual dysfunction. But there are people who are like this, and some they're lucky. They're just lucky. It's not something I would play Russian roulette with, though. No way. No way. Again, I've been through these experiences where I've had men, full-grown men, at wit's end and in tears with me over video calls and shit, and just looking at the pain in their fucking face from long-standing dick problems and long-standing libido issues. Like, they've completely lost their manhood. It's not fucking pretty, dude. I'm sensitive to AIs. Tried low dose masteron. Still get the joint pain. Yeah, so you're one of those people. Tiredness, etc. I'm going to make some Liquid X. That'd be your last shot. That's your last attempt to try to dial in with AIs or DHT derivatives. That's your last chance, man. If you try Liquid X, which is like a liquid with ground up Arimidex, and you're dosing like 0.001 milligrams at a time, and that still causes you problems, your aromatase enzymes cannot stand inhibition. You're a hyper responder to the shit, and plenty of people are. Hey, Corey, hope you're good, man. I hear a lot about Accutane's effect on erections. Is it an AI? What's the mechanism there? Accutane blocks dihydrotestosterone, so you end up with more estradiol and less DHT, which is a perfect recipe for dick problems. That's essentially what it does. Dangerwood, any steroid cycle that can help with PSSD? Appreciate your work. Yeah, sure. But, keep in mind that regardless, like, the idea on the forums is a little skewed. They think you can just run steroid cycles and then PCT off, and then you'll be cured or something. And for some people, magically that works. It doesn't work during the cycle because estrogen's too high. But they got flooded with DHT. DHT probably upregulated nitric oxide synthase in the penis, and optimized penile endothelial function, which fosters blood flow. Maybe did some nerve ending optimization. DHT's, largely responsible for penile sensation, and potentially optimize the pendental nerve, which we think is a part of this condition. That just a whole sexual system as a whole gets fucked, and the pendental nerve is part of that, dorsal nerve as well. So, blasting a bunch of steroids, especially DHT derivative-based steroids, can absolutely give you the androgen receptor activation and therefore the repair of the tissues that you might need. Thereafter, though, you're still going to need to have adequate test and not above range estradiol and adequate DHT. So you're by taking this strategy, which I've seen in the forums, you're definitely like trying to throw you're just shooting a non-targeted arrow in the wilderness a little bit near a target. You want to be a little more surgical than that. Yeah, I mean, with PSSD, there's a laundry list of shit in order that you should try, but a steroid cycle wouldn't be the first thing. If someone is sensitive on an AI, would DHT cream help with that? If you removed the AI and you dosed a little bit of DHT gel, not cream, it's gel, it's really an oil, then yeah, it's less powerful than an AI at blocking estradiol, that's for sure. But it's still pretty fucking powerful, and you got to dose low. Corey was on Accutane a little over a decade ago. Shocker, the SSR experiment was about a year and a half ago after I got off Accutane. Yeah, I mean, some of the people that end up coming to me with PFS or PSSD had also had like 2 of these invading compounds or bad compounds in their regimens. At one point they had been using finasteride 10 years ago, and at the moment they're using citalopram or something. So it's certainly reasonable to assume that there's a compounding effect there. All right, boys, as I said in the beginning, coaching is 50% off. I've never done this ever. So, I mean, these are the coaching packages are, this is a big deal. You're working with me for a long time, and I'm responsible for fixing your sexual dysfunction. Getting libido and erections is fucking killer. Guys from all around the world hire me, mostly business people, obviously people that, have the time and are willing to report. Just work on your end. It's not all hunky-dory, man. I mean, you've got to report to me every 2-3 days, and I've got to analyze your situation. There's things you're going to have to try. It's a journey, but we get people better. I always know what to do. Coaching right now is 50% off. That's unheard of. You're saving thousands of dollars literally on everything, every coaching package. So execute at livecortex.com. That's the code. The code and the link is down in the description. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Great questions. I've got a busy day ahead of me today. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope that this week doing content every day gave you guys like more valuable information to sit and stew about and think about and implement into your protocols. I'm going to be continuing to do that. It's something that I really enjoy doing content. And I sort of had a conversation with myself about it. Like, why am I not doing it every day? You know, I can. Why am I not doing it every day? This summer has been a somewhat of a rough summer, busy summer, a lot of external shit going on in my life. So that certainly inhibited me from creating content, but I'm going to be back to doing at least 4 days a week and probably try to keep this pattern of 5 days a week. It's been really fun. It makes me think, it makes me reference all kinds of data and notes from client situations to have topics, and it's been fucking awesome. So I've been happy to put out content for you guys at that level, and I will continue. Okay, everyone, have a great day. Talk this week. Content coming Monday. All right, rock on. Bye-bye. 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 Oh, fuck.